As an African-American woman coming up in the business, you were a poli-sci major in college. Talk about the challenges you faced early as a Black woman in this business.
Oh, yeah. It's funny, as far, that was a long time ago when I started,
Sure.
and yet there are things that I still think about. You
Hmm.
know, Eugene, I would say that it's hard because you walk into a place and you want to know that you're always being given the benefit of the doubt.
Hmm.
But I found myself always having to feel like I had to be three times as good to get half as much. You walk into rooms, you walk into situations wearing armor because you feel like you have to always be the strongest in the room and the best.
Hmm.
Um, and I also think that I ran into different kinds of issues because in a newsroom, you will see African American reporters or reporters of color.
Hmm.
What you don't always see are African Americans in management positions. And
Right.
so I found myself by myself. And when you sit at that table, I was often the only African American at that table. Not at that point the head of the table, just the only one at the table. And
Hmm.
so I would hear something, challenge it maybe, and I would get challenged. Um, and it's hard being the only one at the table
Hmm.
when you feel like your voice is alone.
Yeah.
But little by little, I was lucky because I had bosses who, I had some bad bosses, I won't lie, but I also had some good bosses who
Hmm.
heard my voice and wanted to elevate me. But it wasn't just making sure that voices are heard, but how are we telling those stories? Who's being hired to tell those stories? And that's how I knew that I wanted to go into management because we didn't, while we may get to the table, we didn't have people of color who were at the heads of the table. And I thought
Right.
that was important.
That's a big distinction, isn't it? You know,
Yeah,
because it's one thing to be able to speak up in a situation. It's another thing to put things in action or put things in motion.
that's right.
And that's a whole other thing. I couldn't agree with that more. You know, interestingly, when I think about the markets you've been in as well, I have to say this. I have to think you're as a Black woman, you're coming into this pretty battle hardened. I mean, Sacramento, and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know what I mean.
yeah,
Pretty,
yeah.
2 feet tall and bulletproof at this point. So
Well,
yeah, we're all
yeah,
human. But does that help?
it
Being have
does. It does.
yeah.
It does. That's a great, yeah, it does. Having the experience does help. Having lived in different places, not only as a news director, but
Mhm.
I've lived all over the country. So as a reporter, I started out in Peoria, and then I moved to Mobile and to Charlotte and to
Wow.
the Bay Area, and to Sacramento and to Milwaukee and to here. So I've been in different markets, pretty
Mhm.
much all over the country, and so that's given me yeah, that's given me some experience. Um, I would also say that I'm not as young anymore, so I understand, some of the lessons. But if I could talk to my 20-year-old self or 25-year-old self, there are things that I've learned along the way that I think have helped me. And I would also say this too.
Mhm.
Um, it's why I also know that I can stand in a room and be the only and feel confident
Right.
because I've been there and I know, you can challenge me, but I know what I'm talking about. I've been to these newsrooms. We've won awards, we've won ratings. I know what we're talking about. So there's credibility there, which I think
Yeah,
helps me as well.
that's right. And people pick up on that kind of thing. You know
I
what I mean? When
I
when
hope
someone's
so.
really been around in
Yeah.
this, people pick up on that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What's the biggest challenge you see for Black reporters that either have worked under you or it doesn't necessarily have to be under you? There's always that early, it's almost like teachers. The big problem for teachers is dropping out in the first year. That's
Yeah.
where they a lot of teachers. And I have to think
Right.
journalists of color, it's so jolting to be in a newsroom and be the only one. And people dropping out of the business after a short period of time is a difficulty.
It
What
is.
are you seeing out there for difficulties for young reporters?
I think a lot of times, kind of what I mentioned before,
Yeah.
about first of all, just when you're the only in a room, people look at you differently.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, sometimes there's a level of, can you do this?
Right.
Um, it's finding yourself in positions where you want to pitch stories and you know that they're important stories, but you don't always get buy in from the people who are above you.
Mhm.
Or sometimes it could be relegated to certain stories, but I want to cover that. Yeah, why don't you cover this?
Mhm.
Um, when reporters are starting out, oftentimes they start out in very small markets. That's very typical. And a
Sure.
lot of times, these really tiny markets, there aren't a lot of people of color in those communities. And so there's a feeling of isolation, let alone the stories that you think you should be doing. So I think that's different.
Mhm.
I think also just keeping young reporters in the business. You know, it's not, you don't go into journalism a lot of times for the paycheck, or
Right.
even into broadcasting. You go because it's a calling. So it's keeping the people who are doing well in the business. I think that's a challenge too.
Mhm.
Um, and also just, I would just say overall, especially reporters of color, just reminding them that their voices are important and that they may run up against obstacles when it comes to wanting to do the kinds of stories or voicing concerns, and
Mhm.
not to be discouraged if you aren't getting the kind of attention that you should be. I think is a challenge as well.
Right. You've been a news director, as you mentioned in your career. A huge bit I want to talk about here for a second, because that's an enormous power position in a newsroom. I mean,
Yeah.
you get to say yes or no,
Right.
basically. There are
You-
not many positions where a black person gets to say yes or no and that's the final word, by the way, that yes or no. That's a very
Right.
rare thing.
Right.
Is there a certain skill set, it seems to you, and you've witnessed in your journey, to be able to take that step up into management? What does one have to be able to be a news director of any color and be successful at it?
You know, one of the things that I was very proud of, that when bosses promoted me, they said that I had two things that helped me to succeed and why I was promoted. And there are two passions that I have. First of all, I was told, and I'm just a good newswoman. I just love news. I
Yeah.
love news. I love the craft of news. I love marrying wonderful words and pictures. I love great storytelling. I love drilling down. I like asking questions. I like being a critical thinker, which I think is important. I see myself as the viewer. I am the viewer. I am the advocate for the viewer. I heard a wonderful saying: we don't produce for the newsroom, we produce for the living room. So
Nice.
it's remembering that. So I just loved news, local, national, global. I didn't care. I saw that as my calling, and that was my passion. And that's how I built my teams in the newsroom. And then
Mhm.
the second thing, I laugh because it's something I just dearly love, but it's odd, I know, but I love managing people. I
Hmm.
love leading people. I love building teams. I see myself as the coach. I see myself as the head coach. And so when I look at how do you cover breaking news wonderfully, how do you cover investigative, it starts with the people that you hire, and you're good to them. And I find that when you're good to your people, they are good to you. And when you get out of their way and you give them the tools that they need and you recognize where they are strong, um, they do great work.
Mhm.
And when they do great work, they're energized. And when they're energized, the work reflects that. So
Right.
I would try to bring that spirit into the leadership positions that I've been in. And it's been successful. But again, it's also something that I love. So being a good news person, and I think being good with building teams is important.
That foundational thing, right? Everything has to have a foundation to build on. That's for sure.
Right.
One of the problems when you're a minority in a newsroom is having someone who has your back, basically.
Right.
And
Right.
let me kind of put it this way: in a lot of endeavors out there, there's a lot of bosses who are willing to let you fail,
Mhm.
um, so you can grow from it. But in a lot of cases, when you're the minority, you don't get that
That's a
feeling.
good point.
If you
Yeah.
fail, you just fail.
Right.
It's viewed differently. Do you know
It
what I mean?
is.
Difficulty. So
It is.
how important, I'm back to the idea of management and the idea of being that voice in the room and say, okay, this reporter may have missed it on this one just by a little bit, but I think there's something we can work with here. Let's all not panic. Let's just do a little training over the next 6 months, whatever the case may be. How
Yeah.
important is that for someone to have someone at their back like that?
It's very important. It's very important. Failure is a great teacher. Failure
Mhm.
is a great teacher. We all learn from failure. But when you're a person of color, you don't feel like you have that luxury. I don't
Right.
have the luxury to fail because everyone's looking at me. I'm automatically in a spotlight. And so I had to walk into a room and be the biggest, you know, I hate,
Mhm.
forgive my language, badass in the room. I don't
Right.
have the luxury to fail because there are people who will, if I do, may assume, she wasn't going to make it anyway. And so I
Mhm.
never felt that way. And so as a news director, I always wanted to have the best ratings or award winning, or you just feel like you have to. But I have also had bosses who, when I have fallen short, because that's how you learn, they were good enough to say, but that's okay. What did you learn from it? What did you
Mhm.
learn from it? And that's how I also try to manage as well. But I have to say, I understand that in theory and I get it. But I do think when you're a person of color, that's something that's always in the back of your mind. I don't want to fail. I don't want to fail because people may think I'm going to, or they may expect it.
Right.
And it's not fair, but it's often the way it is.
Right, exactly right. My frustration since the 90s or 1995 specifically, how we're tracking hiring for Black people in newsrooms has been sort of an up and down thing, but not a whole lot of progress. Do you have a crystal ball personally? That are you optimistic about the more Black representation? Do you see positive signs in the news business?
I do.
Mhm.
Here's where the I think the good news, and then I would say where I'm a little bit, I won't say concerned, but I'm watching very carefully. Um, Even before George Floyd, even before all of the things that happened last year, and I mentioned this in the article. Um, Stations know that it is important for their personnel on camera and off camera to reflect the communities that they serve. So it is good business and smart business to have a diverse workforce in stations,
Mhm.
newsrooms, and otherwise. I think that after George Floyd, it became, there was a big a light. We shined a light on that, and it's all so it was even more important. But it's always been important. That's the good news. So I think that's the good news. What I am concerned about is it's important right now, but it's always been important. But there's a lot of attention to it. What I am concerned about is what are things going to look like in a year,
Mm.
and is there still going to be this level of engagement? Is there still going to be this level of aggressiveness in hiring? We don't want this to be the flavor of the month. It's got to be ongoing. And
Mhm.
it's not just because, you know, there's a light shining on us and people are going to notice that we don't have a diverse workforce at stations. It's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do. When you have a diverse workplace, you are richer, you
Mhm.
are smarter, you are better thinkers, and so it benefits all of us. So I know it's very top of mind for most media companies, as it should, as it always should be.
Mhm.
But I'm just hoping that it doesn't die down in a year when other things capture our attention.
It's not just Black representation in the newsroom, Native American
Absolutely.
representation, Asian
Absolutely.
American representation.
Have
So
to. We have
yeah,
we have to. And recruiting has been interesting because a lot of people don't know about New Mexico. And so we educate them, because people haven't always been out this way.
Mhm.
But it's so important that we are diverse. And, I'll be honest, when I got here, I didn't see as much diversity as I thought that I would.
Right.
And that was one of the things that I knew, we got to rethink this because that's not who we are as a state or as a country.
I got another question about Black-owned media and small Black-owned media. And I've always had this thought that maybe, here in Albuquerque, we're not a huge part of the population, meaning African Americans,
Right.
but there is the opportunity as well. Meaning, we've had Ronnie Wallace has been here for years, running a publication, Black publication, for over like 25 years now. But it might be time for perhaps some younger bucks to get in the game and really get that
Why
juice
not?
going in the neighborhood. Do you see some of that happening around the country? Are you supportive of that idea as well?
Oh, very supportive. Very
Yeah.
supportive. It's a challenge because I think the desire to do it,
Mhm.
I think the stories and content are absolutely there. A lot of times it's a matter of economics.
Mhm.
And I think that has to do that influences whoever wants to start a publication, you
Mhm.
know. Um, But I do think that their time is right. And I do think that their desire is there. And I
Mhm.
do think that the journalists are there. And I think the people who can put these together are there.
Right.
So there's a lot of entrepreneurial, a big spirit that's going on with entrepreneurs, especially when they're seeing that mainstream media doesn't satisfy what they're interested in and what they
Mhm.
think others are interested in. And so they're going out and forging their own way to create these new ways, these new platforms,
Mhm.
and new streams of content, which I think is really exciting.
You've been here a while now, and I'm sure it's no surprise that the complicated nature of our history, I mean, there's a lot of different tensions and backgrounds and historical things that inform a lot of New Mexico culture here. And it takes a little while to parse out sometimes when you're from the outside. I'm from the outside. I've been here 30 plus years, and I'm still trying to parse a lot of things out.
Yeah.
A lot of difficulties. How challenging has that been for you to kind of get a sense in your arms around New Mexico and the complexities here?
It has been challenging, but in a good way.
Okay.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I've learned that there is a complicated history to this state, and especially when the statue was toppled.
Yes.
Now, because so that brought up a lot, and so I
Yeah.
learned about that, and I've been trying to learn the history, contentious history, and
Mhm.
and trying to understand, well, why when we do a story, we get this kind of response. Some of my biggest educators, I have to say, and sometimes it's difficult, are some of our viewers. Where
Hmm.
when we do a story, they will respond, and it can be positive or negative. And if it's negative, I try to understand where are they coming from. And
Right.
some are just, let me explain why some of us didn't like this. And it's very educational.
Hmm.
There are others who are just kind of angry and nasty. And I have to take that in stride and understand, okay, here's why it's going the way it's going. Some of it has been about culture,
Hmm.
but quite frankly, some of it has been political because we are coming through some contentious times, especially last year.
Right.
Um, but it's a complicated history, but I also find that there's a lot of beauty in this state, which I have enjoyed learning about, and the
Hmm.
people. It's I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it.
When you start getting in, digging into it, it takes your breath away.
It's fun.
I just have to say that personally. It really, there's a point, I think I was about 10 years in, and I was like, wow, this is an amazingly complicated
It is
place.
complicated.
Really, a decade later, you know what I mean?
It is
It's
complicated.
but that's part of our charm and our strength, of course, as you've realized as well, that we
Exactly.
here that is like a mesh screen that's all tied together.
Yep.
I can't thank you enough, Lori, for spending some time with us here at
I
New Mexico.
love this.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
my favorite. I forget we're live. I feel like I'm
I
just having a good conversation over lunch. This is
I
great.
love it. I love it. It's good.